Okay, so Colin, welcome to our AI on our channel. This is actually the first time we do X-Space. Most of the time we just do the video recording, in this case. But let's try different form in this case. Let's start with a brief intro, maybe from your side, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Everyone has his or her first time, right? Glad to be the first time for Kite to host the Twitter space for the podcast. Yeah, a little bit about Pieverse and me. I'm having engineering background like way back in 2016, 17 time. I then started with blockchain infrastructure stuff. I think one of the pivoting moment for me to join, doing what we are doing right now for Web3 space is we realize infrastructure doesn't really bring mass adoption. I mean, it has to be there. The infrastructure has to be there for mass adoption, but the mass adoption can only come from the application side. So that's why me and my team are trying to build something on the application side of the world. It's not only like this is a kind of the difference we have with Kite. I know you guys are also doing an application level of stuff, but for us, we think the application is more, pivotal in terms of bringing real people to come to space, like join us and having the real usage of Web3. So then we'll end up here. We'll end up with having a fantastic Twitter space with you guys. That's a brief intro. I think that's summarize our kind of a journey. Back to you, Scott.
That's very interesting introduction, Colin. For the record, we're not doing application ourselves. We're building infrastructure for people to build application. This is actually not only applied to crypto. If you look at AI world in this case, like currently for last 3 years, the only company get most of the revenue and most of the attention is Nvidia. But each time you attended Nvidia, the only thing they mention is that, hey, imagine the next 3 years going to be a huge increase in the application space because at the end of the day, you cannot just consume on GPU. You need to consume on apps, on application, on AI agent. In this case, this will be repeated. First, you need the infrastructure to lay out the foundation. Then you actually have this all apps to pop up and show, to drive the adoption for the infrastructure. In this case, actually, speak of the infrastructure layer one, there is actually very heated discussion on Twitter space talk about this useless L1s in this case. Like people are saying, hey, like from different Twitter accounts saying like all the L1s eventually go to zero except only Ethereum and Solana. I actually want to hear your opinions, Colin, on this topic because this is actually the most hated discussion I think for this month, for this week.
Yeah, and like who the fuck knows? Like this is a very interesting like observation, interesting, trend of the whole space. Like we are all checking our eyes on first, who will be the next Ethereum? The second, who will be, the next layer one that nobody's talking about, right? I think end of the day, 90%, 95% of layer ones may go to zero. I totally agree with that. But in the meantime, I think there's a one misconception by the crypto Twitter is even though a layer one goes to zero, there's something from it that can be learned and adapted and applied to the newcomers. Like when we think about like the example I'm coming up with is the Libra, which is from I think way back in Facebook time, right? They killed Libra, which is the kind of blockchain Facebook is building at the time. But now, if you check the current blockchain top 10, there's a bunch of offsprings from the Libra project, right? They have the Move programming smart contract language. They have the new consensus built around, the one from Libra. I think this is something it's not appreciated by the crypto Twitter, is that a layer one can go to zero. Everyone's trying to find the one who's not going to zero and bet on it. That's fine. That's Web3. That's crypto. That's speculation. On the other hand, we should see like a technology trend that people are having better and better technologies and better applications because of those dead L1s, right? Libra is one example. There are some other layer ones that I probably should not name names, but like they have certain degrees of contribution to the space, either in terms of their smart contract language, their about the consensus, their kind of ecosystem, BD marketing perspectives. Like there's is something can succession going on in terms of the dead L1s. So yeah, I'm not really talking shit about those dead L1s. I think there's something we can benefit those dead L1s. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Actually, I think I kind of agree with you, and also on this topic, I don't think there will be another general purpose L1, in this case, because Ethereum actually define, what's a smart contract or word computer. Solana drive to another extreme for the performance perspective. From as you mentioned, Libra and Sui actually they have their own innovation. They build on top of this fast pay. They have this bypass consensus, object first, RAS-based object first, this data model and then the object model, and then if you make some payment, you don't actually need to go through the consensus. Actually, I think there is a data like a 70 or 80% of transaction on Sui. They don't actually need to go this consensus, so you don't have this worst state route to do the consensus and speed up the performance by a lot. I do feel like a general purpose layer one. I think it's just a narrative. People like it's a hard truth that most of people the most actually easy to find product market fit in crypto world is issue a shitcoin in this case, and then sell your coin. I think that's the easiest thing to get product market fit. But I think in this case that's probably most of the our ones doing like issue a shitcoin and then profit from the coin. But I do feel like a special purpose built L1 has a space to live in this case. For example, that's actually the whole thesis of the Kite AI in this case, because if you think about the agent payment, if you think like, let's go back to the agent finance here. If you think about the future, most of the agents will make payment themselves instead of human, because payment is actually the most tedious and the step that people don't want to do. Like I definitely don't want to do payment myself. I have to fill in like a 14 different fields for a credit card, and then the credit card may reject me as well in this case if I'm shopping on a new website. It's the most tedious step actually no one want to handle themselves. So in the future, 100% of payment will handled by the agent in this case. And that's why actually from certain perspective, the whole payment experience will be completely revamped use agent. And every single agent I look at agent, I consider them as a developer, because agent is essentially a general purpose developer. They can use any API they are exposed to. They can use any MCP they are exposed to. They can do the research themselves. They can search web. They can do all the stuff. Basically, they're developer. And what's actually the best payment rail for a developer, which is stablecoin on blockchain. So that's why I think there is a strong fundamental, there is a strong demanding for agentic finance and agentic payment on blockchain space, requires a special purpose built layer one. But Colin, I definitely want to hear your opinion on this part.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo back to what you mentioned. I think there are two perspectives that I want to share. The first perspective is, I think, from you guys' experiences in terms of making tedious payments stuff, right? I'm talking about integrating with traditional Web2 e-commerce. I'm talking about how do agents can actually, not do x402, but do credit card. This kind of a thing, there has to be someone building that, right? Maybe it's not Kite building that, maybe it's something else. Like there must be agents handling that kind of, I would say, legacy payment stuff. That's the hard
So
work. Yep. Go
Colin,
ahead.
actually, if you check what OpenAI released last month, actually earlier October, I forget 15th, they actually define a whole API for merchant to define like what's SKU you have, what goods you're actually selling, and then they define a checkout flow. So they basically define the whole experience for X402 and facilitator without mentioning, without using X402 standard or facilitator standard. Underlying, they are using credit card. They basically say ChatGPT now can use user's credit card to do the shopping with every single merchant registered on OpenAI in this case. So actually, they are redefining this part in this case from OpenAI perspective 2 months ago. That's why I think, I think it totally makes sense. You don't want to do shopping, in the future. You should be delegated to OpenAI personal agent in this case. But that's why I think the only thing I think is strong is they share the credit card with their user. Agent shouldn't access users' credit card. I think it's unsafe. The plus 3DS is huge in this case. Like actually, I don't know about you, but I actually replaced at least 3 times for my credit card for over last 2 years because like every 6 months, I don't know why. Maybe sometimes it's something wrong with ramp credit card. But every 6 months, someone is actually I have a transaction I don't recognize and say, hey, I need to dispute this transaction. The new card issued to me in this case. Imagine this happened to the agent. You may have like new credit card issued to every single day.
Yeah, I know. I think, but the thing is, there must be people still building stuff around the legacy payment system, right? Could be agents, could be OpenAI's new standard. There must be a bridge for the kind of the legacy payment network. However, I want to focus on the second perspective. That's more on the brave new world, which is crypto, which is blockchain. I think right now, even for us, for Pieverse, we think the second route is probably the least kind of a friction way to introduce agentic economy or agentic payment using x402 or AP2 or other agent-to-agent payment protocol, because we have the least kind of the friction. We know everything we're buying could be digital. We start from digital stuff, right? We're not talking about e-commerce. That's a huge benefit for all the kind of developers, teams, startups building on this kind of building on top of this perspective. I just want to say, right, from our perspective, we think we want to show some respect for people building the first one, right? Like for people building kind of like for OpenAI or any other startup that trying to kind of integrate their legacy payment system to the agentic economy. That's kind of a dirty work, quote unquote dirty work, because it requires lots of efforts and you have to be really backward compatible for the legacy financial system or whatsoever. However, on the other hand, we should leverage more uh, benefits and advantages of the second perspective, which is what we're building right now. Like for us, what we started with the invoice payments, right? The invoice is basically someone tries to pay another person, you issue an invoice. That's exactly like one kind of a payment that's very tedious to do in traditional finance world. But on Web3, you can expedite that with smart contracts and just normal crypto payments. And that can be easily integrated into the agent to agent payment as well. Like imagine you just not instead of people issuing invoices to another person, like a skilled individual or a freelancer, you can delegate that work to the agents, and the agent can do the kind of A2A kind of a stuff. I think I talked about those two perspectives because I think not many people are having kind of the appreciation or the respect for the traditional, for the legacy kind of a payment stuff. I think what you just mentioned about OpenAI, that's something we kind of we have to show some thanks to them for kind of bridging the world. I know Kite is building has spent lots of time also on this kind of traditional e-commerce like checkout workflow and stuff like that. I think we have to admit it's a pretty tedious and pretty hard process. On the other hand, let's just fight for more in the Web3 space, because that's something we can develop the fastest, the best, and the most user-friendly user experiences, because we just don't have this kind of a legacy burden on top of us. Back to you, Scott.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you, Colin here. I think when people demand invoice, they're actually not demanding, it's actually a little bit beyond a receipt. It's actually tracking from payment to the items I want to shop, and then to the place and time we actually shop it in this case. Actually, that's actually a proof of, if assume that this is actually done by agent, sometimes I call it proof of AI in this case. You actually have at the end of the day, the payment, what item you're shopping, your intent there, and then tracking to the session. Was this session actually a delegate this agent to? For example, you can say, hey, agent, help me to arrange a birthday party tomorrow. Buy birthday cake, book a place for the party, and invited 20 people. Each of them is actually a different session because each of them still, it's actually 3 sessions, 3 delegations. Book a birthday cake, rental a place for birthday party, and then invite 15 of my friends, each of them a session. And then at the end of the day, each of them will map to a payment. And then from the session, you have agent because, for example, all the command I gave is actually my ChatGPT. So in this case, all the sessions, which is 3 sessions, will track back to the agent and then track back to user. And then the more I use the agent, the more I make payment, I have more reputation here in this case because I make legit payment. I have a legit transaction in this case. So in this case, I pay what I need in this case. So basically accumulate my credit score, like an agent credit score and user credit score. So it's actually, I think, in the brave new world, the invoice will be revamped to this proof of the payment or proof AI, from proof AI payment. I think that's actually what actually required in this case. It's probably going to replace the invoice. But again, so I think checkout invoice strongly closely in this case related to the e-commerce use case. But if you think about some API usage, data usage, it's probably a completely new different flows for the payment.
Yeah, Scott, I think I probably have to correct you here. I think you are mentioning to receipt, right? It's like the proof of payment. That's
So
what you're referring to, right, in the session.
I think mentioning both the invoice and a receipt in this case. I think it's a
Okay.
two things are closely associated with each other. Please, Collins, please correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah, no worries. I think what you mentioned is primarily focused on receipts. It's basically like in the session, you have the reputation based on the receipts, which is the proof of agents making payments, or not only payments, but activities, right? That kind of builds a reputation for each agent. When I talk about invoice, I'm basically talking about the intention for collecting payment, right? So I'm issuing an invoice for you because I probably I provided my time for you for, let's say, I design a website for you, right? I wanted you to pay me $100. So I send you the invoice that's like issuing my intention to collect your payment for me. That's kind of invoice. Like in the agentic world, I think that's also, there's a use case for that, but I don't think that's like as much as prevalent as the receipts. On the other hand, receipts is basically whenever you make any kind of activity from the agents or human beings, you have a proof of that. It could be on-chain, it could be just a PDF, doesn't matter, but it's like something we can leverage to build a reputation of either agent or human beings. But yeah, I probably digress a little bit, but it's just to clarify things up a little bit.
That's okay. Thanks for explaining this. I definitely learned something here in this case. I'm not very familiar with this invoice flow. I guess that case is most likely matching to the agent intent in this case, because at the end of the day,
Yep,
you need to have agent intent matched to the payment receipt, and then these two need
yep,
to be mapped at the end of the day, in this case. Otherwise, you basically you have your agent hallucinating, buying something not user's intent.
exactly. Another thing I want to circle back to you is about the session idea. I think like we've had to discuss this idea before, and that's also something I learned from Kite. Like you guys are not thinking about agentic payments only from, payment is not only a one-time thing like that happens at a time, right? You guys have this kind of idea about whenever you have to do a payment, there's a session. Like the session, so with the session, you guys solve the question about a more nuanced problem in terms of payment. That's about like it could be refund, it could be disputes. Right now, I think that's something I definitely have to shout out to Kite team that not every payment project or agentic payment project is thinking about that. It's like how do you handle refunds? How do you handle this kind of a dispute resolution process? That's something I get pretty impressed with you guys, and I think that's also Pieverse is very happy to partner with Kite. So in the future, when we do kind of more integration with Kite, we will also integrate into this kind of payment session. So on the Kite mainnet, then we can enable different kinds of use cases with this kind of architecture.
Thanks, Colin. I think this is actually two-part here. One is actually payment life cycle, because not most of the payment is probably much complicated than just a simple transfer in this case. Most of payment, think about it, you do a shopping in the in Safeway, or you do a shopping in this Costco. You actually have a shopping window, like in this case, like you can return the item within the next 30 days or 60 days, and you got a refund in this case. Like every single payment transaction is actually a life cycle. It need to be programmable, because different business logic actually requires different refund policy, different dispute policy in this case. This is actually payment lifecycle. But there is another part of this is actually the delegation. I think in the future, if you need to approve every single payment, then you don't actually need an agent. You can just have the agent, do all the work for you, and then you approve every single payment. But I don't think it's feasible in the future because tons of those things agent need in this case is actually smaller things, like I call it agent native activity or agent native payment. Maybe like just agent to agent call, asking to do a research and pay like 1 cent, or agent call a particular research data and call like 0 cents, 0.1 cents, or agent do an API, or agent call rental another GPU, make it like more powerful in this case. So all these small things, you don't want to prove step by step. There was joking like a Web3 game, you need to sign every single transaction for every bullet you have. If the FPS game for Web3 game, you don't want to do that. Think about this. You don't want to do that. Instead, you want to have delegated sessions. So in this case, instead of say I need to approve every single API call, I say this is actually a session. Help me arrange birthday party, invite 15 friends. I have a $200 budget for it. If you met something, figure it out yourself. Don't need to bother me as long as it's within $200 budget. I don't need your, interrupt me. Only interrupt me if you met a blocker, which you cannot handle within, desired time or within the time bound or the this this money bound. For example, if you cannot solve this problem, like in less than $200, you come back to me, provide me option 1, 2, 3. I think that's actually how the future will go in terms of this. So that's why delegated payment is actually one of the most important metrics we want to measure in the Kite ecosystem.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you remind me of what we are doing with PyUSD because we are not having sessions as much as what Kite is building, the underlying payment infra, but we do share the same philosophy. So like it's an interesting story. So we are on Binance ecosystem on BNB chain, and right now the problem with BNB chain is there's no like native stablecoin that supports the EIP 3009, right? That's kind of a headache all the BNB developers are having for building x402 stuff. So there's many ways of how to bypass this problem. And I think what we just did, our technology solution is kind of pretty much like what Scott mentions in terms of the session. Like the idea is we have a wrapping mechanism, which is like this is technically it's pretty straightforward, so it's not really hard. The idea is to simulate using a session. It's like whenever a person wants to use X402 to conduct some business, like micropayments, whatever, there's many options you can do that, right? You can do like from other teams on BNB ecosystem, we've seen people using approve first mechanism, like you approve first time, and then you can use that as a EIP 3009 compatible stablecoin. So you basically have a whole new idea about, you basically rewrite EIP 3009 in terms of another, the protocol. On the other hand, what we did is, okay, we're not asking users to approve the usage of the tokens. We just wrap it. So the idea is we think the wrapped token, the wrapped stablecoin, is better than the allowance thing on the smart contract world. So if you approve $100, you essentially have a $100 balance that you can spend in the session, quote unquote, right? When you spend for X402. What we think is 100 allowance is not as good or as straightforward as 100 Pi USD token balance. So whenever you start a session, you wrap your 100 USDT into 100 Pi USD, and you can spend whatever with X402, how much ever you want and whatever you want to buy with $100. You will never spend more than that. This is kind of a proven allowance thing, I think, which is better than the approved approach. And we also want to expand beyond stablecoins, right? If we have this wrapping, why not do everything? Why not just wrap everything, right? So that's why we think we're doing all kinds of partnerships right now. It's like we have a campaign called Perfect Agents because we want to build our own agents. And we can wrap all kinds of different coins, cryptos, partnership tokens into all this kind of a Pi XXX token. So you can spend that as a proof in the session to spend that to use X402 to buy stuff or transfer. That's just basically something I kind of get inspired from what Scott you just mentioned.
Yeah, Colin, I think you also inspire me on the things we're actually doing today in Kite. So we are working on the mainnet launch in this case, and then what one thing we do is that for every single stable coin launch on our mainnet, we want them to natively spot ERC 3009 in this case. So basically we have this. So what actually from user experience perspective is that if you do a stablecoin payment, you can have zero gas fee. So someone will, in this case, Kite Foundation will pay for your gas fee in this case. So you don't need to pay any single gas fee if it's just transaction or payment in this case, and that's actually what Kite is building for. And then this is actually should be a default standard in the future as well. And also there is a long-term plan to make this a more like a standard on not only on the protocol level, because currently the implementation in this case is actually not only we implement ERC 3009, but also we have a relay layer in this case, on top of the RPC to actually make sure every single transaction don't need to pay a gas fee. But that actually need change on wallet. For example, if we're working with tons of almost all the major wallet here, they actually need to change the configuration to support this new method, pay with transact with this authorization in this case to bypass the gas fee. But we want to define this on the blockchain infra level in the future. So not only have a relay layer support this zero gas fee, but on the infra level, every single stablecoin payment requires zero fee in this case. It's configurable fee in this case. We will start with zero fee, but later on we may actually use a stablecoin payment fee to buy back Kite token in the future. In this
Interesting.
case. But yeah,
Scott,
I can definitely.
I'm interrupting here a little bit. Just want to know you guys' thoughts, maybe Rich as well. What do you guys see? What do you guys say about Coinbase just enabled their fee switch on the X402 facilitator? Do you guys think you will do that for Kite facilitator as well, or do you think that's a good idea? Like, how do you think facilitators should be making money, and how do you view this kind of a fee switch?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Colin, I know you actually work on Uber before for a while in this case as well. I think so. First, I think we are definitely adoption first in this case. We want to be the default payment rail for every single major agent transaction in the future in this case. So probably for the foreseeable future, we will not turn on this fee button in this case. Basically, not only we're not going to turn on this fee button, we actually want to make sure we use Kite token to incentivize people to use Kite as a payment rail in this case. Basically incentivize. First is that whoever built agent in this case, we want to make sure they are incentivized to deploy Kite as a default payment rail. User use agent, we want to incentivize this as well. And then in this case, just want to make sure we have the most, more agent built on top of Kite and more user on top of Kite. It's like how Uber incentivize driver and the rider in this case.
Yeah, makes sense.
Eventually, yeah, I think eventually we will turn on the fee button, but instead of saying, hey, the fee go back to Kite Foundation, most likely we're going to use the fee to buy back Kite token to reward all the Kite token holders in this case. So at end of the day, I think that's actually how it will go, but it's probably in the distant future.
Yeah, sounds good. Makes sense to me. Yeah, I can add to my idea about this as well. So I think we are thinking about this as well because we are also running facilitators on both the Binance ecosystem, BNB chain, as well as on Base. I think we're also having this kind of a discussion. Should we turn on the switch? And we decided not. And the reason is like the thing is we think more revenue should be looked at for the derivatives of the facilitator, not the facilitator business itself. If you focus only on the facilitator, the barrier to entry for a facilitator is very, very low, right? I mean, it's hard to build a really scalable facilitator backend service, that's for sure. But like entry to barrier is pretty low, so that is like you can see a race to the bottom for the facilitators, right? Everyone will just lower their fees. So what we think is we should focus on the added value from the facilitators. In our case, or I think it's the same applies to Kite ecosystem as well, is that we should be more focusing on the agentic economy. What agents can do, what kind of activities will agents be enabling users to do? How will we gather, user data or user interests about what pain points are we solving and what's their intention for paying for this kind of a thing? Right? Then we can talk about how do we generate revenue from that activity instead of focusing on facilitator itself. That's my idea towards this kind of X402 phase switch. Yeah, back to you, Scott.
I think, yeah, Colin, actually very interesting things here. I think for facilitator, you probably want to adopt a different business model here. Because what I see for facilitator, currently there, as you mentioned, there is actually a very low bar to build a new facilitator. But on the other hand, it's actually very high bar to build the right business logic to fit end-to-end use case. In this case, I think what I really like is from Salesforce is there is a new department called Agentforce. They don't charge per usage, they charge by the tasks done. So instead of say, hey, you use 2 hours of my GPU, I'm going to charge you $20, $2 or $10. They say, hey, your Agentforce help me complete one task. I'm going to charge you $2 in this case. I think for facilitator, it's the same thing. If the facilitator help you to finish a task of successfully wrap up a transaction, it's much easier to charge like 50 cents or 22 cents or 20 cents from there. In this case, I feel like a facilitator actually it's extremely easy to build a facilitator, but on the other hand, it's extremely hard to build a facilitator people can use because of the different business logic and the checkout flow, and then how to handle the different dispute flow. That's actually pretty hard.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. That's something I really like. That's kind of a you basically are changing the metrics for how you define the facilitator's work, right? It's not only charged by transaction, but charged by the intention or charged by the task. Hmm. That's something that's very interesting. Yeah, thanks for the input, Scott.
Yeah, so I think we are entering a new agentic world. Everything probably should think from first principle. I think from first principle, agent help people do delegate work. If that delegate work, you don't want to pay them per hour, because if they don't finish the work you delegate them, like they even mess up, why do you actually pay them per hour? You want to pay them like per work done. I think that's much easier business model than just charging per hour in this case.
Yeah,
Okay,
totally
I
agree.
saw Chi Joy. Yeah, I saw Chi Joy. Chi, do you want to say hi to Colin? And then,
Hey guys, sorry about joining late. I was calling from Abu Dhabi in the Abu Dhabi Finance Week this week, so a bit chaotic in terms of the schedule. But great chatting with you, Colin, in the Twitter space. I was listening for about 20 minutes. Really, really insightful conversations from both you and Scott talking about like the imagination of like the future business and the use cases. Maybe one thing I want to add on top of what Scott mentioned, which first of all, very agree on like the business model charged per uh, task force or like a workflow, because actually this is also something we have been challenged by some of the very senior payment experts that we are like trying to bounce ideas with and get some criticism even from them. One thing that I think we heard multiple times from people is about um, the the feasibility of like micropayments or like per transaction business model, whether this is the best for agents. Because I think X402 particularly, for example, is talking about, like a lot of use cases about micropayments. Then I think some people would say, and when I say some people, those are very, very senior payment people who worked in, decades in Visa or like a Google Pay or like a PayPal type of places. They would say, oh, the problem about micropayments is it has been a business model that big payment fintech company have tried for more than 5 years, and it doesn't, like a really push for anything. And that is not because of the challenge of technology, but it's the challenge of like a customer's mindset or a consumer's mind. Because when it's compared to like a monthly or annual subscription that people would pay upfront, um, it's actually like the micropayments or like per transaction problem is about every single second they're paying for something. If you're talking about real-time micropayments, then would they be happy for that, even though like the final result would be more, if like a lower cost than monthly subscription, or actually the subscription business model is actually more natural and more comfortable for consumers. So then how could you get support from the merchant side or from the service side to support this change of business model? Then that comes to more like task flow down type of business model, as what Scott mentioned about what Salesforce is pushing for. Because for those people, the goal here is to get something sold out, sold to the consumers. And if you can help, the agent can help them to get the task down, or like get something, being sold, then they will be more supportive to like that type of like a business, a charge, to forward. So that is like a one side of like the kind of like input or comments from those people. But on the other side, some people who also are very experienced in the payment industry, or like experienced with the payment use cases, would say actually the micropayments is a real need that's particularly will be something agents can help solve. For example, when it comes to the content consumption, that like there's a lot of needs to access like the Wall Street Journal, or like even NASDAQ data API for stock index data to complete some tasks. Then instead of like paying for like a very, very expensive 5 figures business annual subscription to Bloomberg or NASDAQ, then you can just pay for like per access or task flow that's needed, all those data from their API. It's actually going to be a game changing for those people. Then to them, they felt like the micropayments type of a business model makes sense. But anyways, I think both of them have very, very good input and observations. We will see how the word is, moving forward, and how the business model. Probably there's going to be a hybrid of different type of business models and emergence of some new business models as per task flow. That type of thing that's it's used to not be the case that Salesforce charge per seat type of business model.
Yeah, this is a very interesting thing. I want to chime in a little bit. So when you talk about like the human behavior, it's like when you talk about that's the time when we talk about psychology, right? As a normal human being, if I'm playing a game, I would rather pay the monthly subscription like for a month. If you play World of Warcraft, right? That's like way back. You don't want to play the card that pre-charges your time to play, like you can play 5 hours, stuff like that. I never want to use that. I always prefer, I want to buy out a whole month of a time I can play the game. I think the psychological reason is you feel kind of losing something whenever you're playing game that's calculated by the resources you're consuming. In the gameplay example, that's the time you're spending on that. I want to play the game without this kind of psychological burden. So that's why I always prefer subscription, or like buying a whole bunch of stuff, the resources in advance. But that's humans, right? That's like human psychology. I'm always emphasizing that. If you talk about agents, though, if you talk about agents without this kind of psychological factors, I think they will be very down to earth and implement whatever the original tax dictates, right? They don't care if you are buying them the whole subscription thing, or they just paying by minute or paying by the micro whatever metric you are referring to. Like my favorite example is probably in the future, agent can calling the underlying agent can calling their underlying large language model to spawn a new AI agent or stuff like that. In that case, the agent will be paying tokens of another large language model, right? That's a very interesting use case, and they don't care about if I do the subscription, $20 per month for OpenAI, or just pay per API request. I would like the agents may even prefer paying by the API request. That's like how they are programmed. So I think if we don't regard this if we're just taking the human psychology out of the equation, like the agents and the micropayments should be the way to go in the future. Even though I myself, I'm not a payment person. Okay, so I'm not really into the payment industry, the legacy payment industry for a very long time. I don't have so much experience in that sector, but I do think nobody has found the perfect use case for micropayments yet. It could be agents using large language model. It could be agents paying some other stuff for like content consuming or whatever. We haven't envisioned that yet, but I think that should be the future. So yeah, I think that's just something I add back to what you just described. Micropayments and agents, they should be the future. We are building something related to us. We're trying to build our perfect agents will have something called agent arena. It's kind of a gamification. And the thing is, we're trying to ask the agents to play games with another agents so they can earn the future, Pieverse tokens or airdrops or the whatever stuff. We are building this kind of a thing with this micropayments thing in the design. So we think that should be we are not, very experienced in terms of developing agents, but from our experiences in building that, this is a use case that's not understood by the payment people before. It's only for the agent native, AI native era of developers. They are kind of knowing the power of this kind of pattern and use cases. Yep, that's my 2 cents. Back to you, Chi.
Yeah. I want to add something here as well. I completely agree on like the new things that will come from the new, like the new demand come from like the new user base. But I also disagree on like comparing that just this to the just to say it's because the payment people don't understand the future needs. I think it's more boiled down to me. It's more boiled down to how do you go to market here. So when it's come to like if you are talking about agents are completely rational and want to optimize the efficiency and cost access when accessing and paying for the services, then let's think about who will be, and I agree on that, but let's think about in the end, it's still a business or developers or are building and serving that agent to, let's say, end users or other businesses. Then who have the incentive to actually push for this, like, for example, like micropayment solutions and business model forward. So two example, I found it's quite fascinating talking to some of the enterprise design partners we and customers we have are very typical needs that from business perspective, especially those new AI startup perspectives, they have this strong desire to push for micropayments and real-time payments. So one example is for a company like general purpose agent companies like Manus, when people are using them to do like the research work, like financial reports research work, then a lot of times they need to call and use uh, APIs like the financial data APIs, like again provided by Bloomberg or the Nasdaq companies. However, because of like those current annual subscription paywall that is blocking those individuals to access, use the agent to do this research and access those API for, then the workaround for some of those agent companies is they pay for the service upfront by themselves to open some annual accounts across those financial companies' product. However, they cannot do that for every single paid service that is offered in the market. So how they can actually have how they can like mitigate this type of like upfront cost and enable their end users to use their agent service, their agents to use those APIs per, like a task flow is something that I think for those people, they're quite interested to push forward. And another kind of use cases is similar to what Perplexity, right? Not Perplexity, but like a Cursor. Some companies like Cursor, how they are charging people right now is also monthly subscription. However, there's no way they can know like how much GPU cost the developers are using upfront. So to them, there's no way to further optimize or like have a very good way to optimize for the building whenever like whenever like the developers are using them. Because in the end of the day, when the developer or like the end users are sending a prompt to those agents, it could be coding agent, it could be design agent, then they will decide, for example, like which foundation model to use and call the like a different like a types of like models for to fit in to balance like the cost and also like the capability of the model for that particular task. So for them, they also like ask us, oh, is there a better way for like a company like a Kite to provide those per call or like a per transaction type of a micropayment solutions so that they don't stuck with the old monthly subscription or annual subscription model, which there's no way for them to fine tune the compute cost, for example, underlying.
Got it. Interesting. That's basically a problem of translating a subscription world with a micropayment world, right? Especially for agents, because agents are good at micropayments, but they have to get the resource by the subscription. Yeah, that's kind of an unsolved question. That's because that's a legacy world we're talking about. It's about the legacy versus a new agentic economy thing.
Yeah. But again, like if you think about those companies we talked to are all the Gen AI company. So what I'm saying is like for those people, they actually have strong incentive to push for a business model because for them, they're like by thinking about the micropayments pricing model, it's already can help them to optimize for their revenue. So that's why for them, they have that strong incentive to push for, but not everybody have this incentive.
Yeah, like if you really want to solve the question, it's like we should go to the bottom of the equation, which is the thing providing their service themselves, right? Bloomberg or whatever, like monthly subscription companies. If we can convince them, that things will be like solved immediately. But which is not the case all the time, right? So we're basically doing a translation layer. How do we translate this kind of resource, the subscription-driven resources into the micropayment services? Um, yeah, well, I don't know. Do you guys have a solution for that? I don't think there's any. If you cannot force Bloomberg to provide the micropayments. So there's no way you can bypass unless, as you mentioned, you buy that service by yourself from cost and you provide those resource in the hopes everyone making micropayment. I don't think that idea though.
Yeah, Colin, I think what will happen is a paradigm shift. The currently all their consumer, all the as you mentioned, Bloomberg or other services, their consumer is human. So human are not used to like and look at this article, pay 2 cents, 1 cent. But one day, over next a few years, I don't think it will be long. I don't think it will 15 years away. Probably over next 3 to 5 years, most of the services consumer going to be agent, but agent will not for they are not willing to let agent to access unlimited results just for $50 a month or $200 a month. Most likely they say, hey, you need to pay per article, pay per API call, pay per data. I think the paradigm shift for this is that who is actually the consumer for the service, or who is the consumer for this API. It will drive the fundamental change for the this price model for them.
Yeah, and also add on top of what Scott mentioned, actually, we cannot name them, but it's surprising that some of those names that we mentioned are doing pilot experiments with AI companies right now because they see the paradigm shift coming.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion. It's an interesting observation. I haven't thought about this, but again, I think you guys have more experiences in terms of the traditional world, how they can adapt to the kind of agentic driven either payment or any other kind of agent native use cases. I think that's a good lesson that all the Web3 companies should be learning as well. You guys have a pretty good experiences there, so I think it's a good lesson for us as well. But for now, I mean, again, in the brave new world, which is crypto, gladly everyone's making like the fun, like Scott mentioned in the very beginning, like one of the major factors driving the use of the Web3 is shitcoins. It's kind of a sad, but on the other hand, it's also kind of very exciting because I like pump.fun is a very good example. Imagine pump.fun is happening this year. Imagining pump.fun was launched with agent native capabilities. So somehow when you play with pump.fun, you can just initiate your own agent at a one click. And you can you can describe what you want from the agent, your trading strategy, stuff like that. I'm just talking out loud. Imagine that happens this year. I think things will be really different. So in the brave new world, agents and the Web3, they have different combinations. They have different chemistry. I think that's also something very exciting. But again, I highly respect what you guys are doing for the traditional, kind of a payment world, either for the services, for the, kind of the gateways. It's totally valuable. But yeah, I'm kind of glad we're on the brave new world.
So Colin, I definitely think what you mentioned is a crack here. I think for every single existing use case, in the future you will have an agent version for this. For example, like a agent version to consume Bloomberg is probably through like API in this case. Actually, I think in the future, in the near future, not like a 50 years away, like in the next 3 to 5 years, most of the doc are not intended for human. Most of the developer doc are intended for agent themselves. You will have very detailed description of this MCP server or API server. What's 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 H case, what's the input output parameter in this case, all this part. Like this is already happening. Like for every single existing system for trading, for Web3 trading, you have trading agent. For prediction market, you have prediction agent prediction market. Like for this, like every single existing product, now you have someone is building an agentic version for it in this case. I think it's coming. I think it's coming soon in this case. And I don't think it's like a new world with I don't think it's like Web2 versus Web3. It's like every single existing product and infra is become agentic one in this case.
Yeah, true. I just saying that Web3 probably have less frictions because there's no legacy burden on the crypto economy right now, right? We don't have to deal with a traditional subscription-based service. We don't have to deal with credit cards. So we basically start light and then we try to solve the problems we have. So that's why I think that, probably the agents can be have more unexpected use case on Web3 instead of Web2. But yeah, it's just my imagination. Yeah.
Exactly. Think about existing payment. If today I'm using a Google credit card or Apple Pay, underlying you have three different parties, 3 or 4 different parties. You have 5 or 6 steps between these 4 different parties, and then you need every single step to have a process successfully to have a happy path. It's not going to be suited for agentic payment world, but if you use stablecoin on blockchain, it's actually just a one single, you can have a wallet in your phone. Maybe like you don't even need a phone to have a wallet, right? You can just be anything. Like it could be like just a like a, your laptop is your agent. It's just an API call to make a transaction, and then another agent on another laptop will receive it. Like so simple, no blocker. It's beautiful agent native. I cannot imagine a better solution than this stablecoin and blockchain for agent payment. It's almost like designed for this.
Yeah,
Yes.
by the way, Colin, I very, very agree on like the observation you said about the on-chain use case will be much less friction for the new, agentic payments related adoption. So that's also actually from our perspective, we treat the on-chain, some of the on-chain use cases like agent trading or so as one of the very top priorities for the go-to-market to Kite, because we do think that from tech completion or tech stack completion and like the just the native compatibility perspective, it's way more compatible than the Web2 world. But it's just that for us, we should bring those people and those like a more like a broader market to on-chain as well.
Yeah, totally agree. That's like when we talk about mass adoption, that's the way to go. We should not only focus on the existing case on Web3, we should